Hi, my name is Doug Edgell from fingersonthefrets.com. Welcome. Today we're going to be demystifying the caged forms and scales. This is a whole new series that I've started on the website. I'm really excited to share my take on this. I've seen this in many books before. I'm sure you have as well, but I'm going to give you my interpretation of this and see if it is any clearer. First of all, when you hear someone talk about the caged forms or the caged scales, immediately get out of your mind that it is a cage. The word caged, it's just C stands for the chord C, A stands for the chord A, G stands for the chord G. So it's an acronym for the chords. Okay, first of all, we're going to do that. So it's letter names standing for the open position chords that are the main chords on the guitar. So here we go. That's the C form. That would be the A form, G form, E form, and D form. And these are your basic chord forms in open position on the guitar. So when you think of moving these forms down the neck, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to play one chord at a time, and this is how I've learned it and how I've been teaching it to folks, and it seems to be working out pretty well. Take one chord at a time. Let's just take your basic C chord, and let's try to play all those forms, the C form, the A form, G form, so forth, down the neck, but only using C chords. And I'm going to use a capo to help demonstrate this. So the C chord, C form, is an open position, and it looks like that. Now what most people don't realize is you have the nut here that's acting as the bar with your first finger. So immediately, what I like to show people is, this is a little bit difficult, and some of these are not practical to play in a real song, but for the purpose of the example and seeing the form on the neck, this is how I like to describe it. What you're really going to be doing is holding it with the fourth finger, the third finger, and the second finger, and then putting your first finger at the nut so you can visualize that that is a bar. That's not always going to be there. It's the nut. Again, we're going to talk about why the capo was invented, to simulate the nut of the guitar going forward, because this is really hard to do, and people couldn't do it. So for instance, that's what you're really doing, but lucky for us, it's there. We only use these fingers. Okay, so let's think about the next chord form. If we're going to go through that series of C, A, G, E, D, in that order always, the next form after the C form would be the A form. Well, what I like to do is look for the root. The root of a chord is the lowest sounding tone, and it's usually the name of the chord. So if it's a C chord, the root of the chord will be a C, and it's usually the lowest sounding tone. A sounding tone would be the lowest tone. Like if you played a piano, the lowest tone that you hit would be the bass note, if you want to think of it like that. So when I strum this chord, the lowest sounding tone is a C. So I look for that root. I put my first finger there, and then I put a bar here to simulate what would be an A form. Now, I can see that using a capo very simply. So I'm going to put the capo at the 3rd fret because that's where the C root note was. And if I think of an A open position form, it looks like this. So we don't have the luxury of throwing the capo on every time we want to change positions. That would be a little silly. So we learned how to use a bar. And the bar is with your first finger, so you can bar it across like this. There's 3 ways to do this chord. You can put the full bar across here over 5 strings, and then you can put a 2, 3, 4 and squish them in there like that. I don't play it like that unless I absolutely have to. I don't like that. It's a little cramped. What I usually do is I'll just bar the 3rd finger here over the 5th fret on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings. And I won't play this high string. It'll be muted out by the angle of my 3rd finger or the angle of my 1st finger over here. The other thing that you can do is use the 4th finger, which I use a lot, and put that there. And again, I'm not going to be playing the high string. With the angle of this finger, it sort of mutes it out. So it becomes a 4-note chord. No big deal. Now, the next form, if you are looking at C, A, G, E, D, would be the G form. So the root from here is going to be this note here, because this is a C and this is a C. So I'm going to take these 3 notes that I've got here, and I'm going to put my first finger there. And when I do that, again, some of these are very impractical to play in a real song, but you have to visualize and see the form. I'm going to stretch out here, and if you can't play these, I'll show you some alternates. That looks like a G there, doesn't it? And if I put the capo on, I'll prove it to you. Capo, 5th fret. Now I've got a G form. No big deal. I can play with these fingers now, and I can play with these. But, again, we don't have the luxury of using the capo in the middle of a song, so we see it like this. Now, that's a little impractical. So, a lot of times we'll just bar at the 5th fret here, keep the little finger here on the top note C, and you've got a 4-note chord. The root is here on the 3rd string, a C, because this is a little hard to do for some people. Okay, so that's the G form. Now, C-A-G-E. E would be the next form. So here's your pinky finger, and that's the root. Well, let's take that bar, which is our capo, our 1st finger, and put it on the 8th fret, and play an E form. So there's your E form, and that's where it came from. So it's as if you're shortening the length of the string each time by using a capo, or your 1st finger simulating a capo. And now you've got a bar chord, which I'm sure many of you have already tried to play this one. So there's a major looking bar chord. But just to recap, if I take this all the way down to the end of the guitar and use my 1st finger at the nut, which you wouldn't do, I'm just demonstrating, that's an E form because that's the E chord. So we play it like this because it's so much easier. But what you're really doing is this. You have to simulate that nut as you move down the guitar. The little finger now is at the 10th fret if I'm holding that C form. I'm sorry, C chord, E form. So I'm going to put my 1st finger there, and then this one is a little bit of a stretch, and you have to stretch out here and simulate a D form. So it's still a C chord. We're playing C chords all the way down the neck, but now I'm simulating a D form. You can see that, and I use my capo in the same way. So there it is. Looks like a D chord in open position. But we're not going to do that. And again, this one's a little awkward to grab in the middle of a song. So a lot of times you'll see folks just playing this, like C5, or you can just grab the triad on the top. We'll get into that later. Now, the next root is here on fret 13 of the 2nd string, and that's a C. And as you know, the 12th fret is the nut in the open again, so the 12th fret would be the open string, so that would be the 1st fret if you were down here. What I'm going to do now is put my 2nd finger there, and the 3rd finger and the 4th finger, and this is the very first chord I showed you. Looks like a C chord, but I have to put this here because there's no nut. I have to simulate the nut, and there it is. And that's the octave C shape right here. I could put the capo there, but it's a little impractical. Okay, so now I'm going to go through them faster, and we're going to stay in key of C for 1 second. C, chord, C form. C chord, A form. C chord, G form. C chord, E form. C chord, D form. C chord, C form, but at the octave. Now let's just change keys for the sake of changing keys. What I like to do is practice these through the circle of fifths. So if you have a theory book or you already know your circle of fifths, 5 notes up from C would be C, D, E, F, G. Well, you go to the key of G. Now, the G chord in open position is the G form, because that's where it came from. You don't have to do this, because the nut's there. So G chord, G form. And if you follow your C, A, G, E, D in that order, the next form after G would be E, C, A, G, E. So the E form would be next. So here's the 2 roots. I use this as the nut, or this capo, or the bar, and now that looks like an E chord, E form. D would be next. Here's your finger. That's the root. You put your 1st finger there, and that looks like a D chord. So there's a G chord. As a lost my sound there. And now here's another root, and this will be the C form of the G chord. Now here's another root, and this would be the A form of the G chord. And then here's a root, and I put the bar there, and this is the octave G form G chord. So you have okay, I hope this has been helpful. This is demystifying the caged forms. There's going to be many more videos, but that's the first one and the first step. And we're going to talk about scales and arpeggios and how to make each one of those chords a different form. But this was step one. So see you in the next video. I hope that was helpful. My name is Doug Edgell from fingersonthefrets.com. And please check out the website if you haven't already. I'm adding new material all the time. Thanks.